The Faxination software has a logical three-tier architecture. Communication between the components in the different layers is always via HTTP with optional SSL encryption. And our new host-to-host capabilities mean that any outbound capable host can send messages to any inbound capable host. Note that the kernel layer is still involved. Hosts do not communicate directly with other hosts, so all of the security, logging, and tracking are still enforced. Scanning documents directly into SharePoint is the most common application for this feature. We'll start with a quick overview of the Faxination 2016 host connectors. All of these are discussed in detail later in the training. First is the Faxination Exchange connector. This is for both inbound and outbound fax and mobile messaging. It's primarily used with Outlook clients. It supports Exchange 2007 and later, and uses Microsoft's address space format to route outgoing messages to a foreign connector created for Faxination integration. This only works with on-premise Exchange. Hosted and multi-tenant configurations such as Office 365 do not support foreign connectors. Faxination integrates with Office 365 using a standard SMTP interface. Our SAP connector is available for inbound and outbound fax and mobile messaging. However, most SAP integrations with Faxination are for outbound faxing from automated processes. The SAP connector was co-developed and is certified by SAP SE. The inbound directory connector, as the name suggests, is for inbound routing of fax and mobile messages to any local or UNC path. For instance, you can associate any shared folder on your network with an inbound fax number, and Faxination will deliver faxes into that folder. This is most commonly used for interfacing with third-party document management systems or creating custom archives. It can also be used to initiate business workflows in scenarios where processes are started based on the arrival of a document in a folder. The Universal Output connector allows users to send outbound fax and mobile messages by printing to a virtual printer. Essentially, we monitor the Windows spool folder for print jobs and then process those jobs as outbound messages instead of printing them. Although end users have access to this interface, it's most commonly used for sending outbound faxes from automated systems, including non-Windows-based systems. Effectively, anything that can print to a shared Windows printer, which includes all of the Linux and Unix platforms and even mobile devices, can use this interface, and there's no physical printer involved. One of the very first connectors developed for Faxination was the print connector. It's inbound only and allows you to associate fax and mobile numbers with any local or shared printer on your network. For instance, instead of a physical fax machine in your office, you could have your incoming faxes routed to your desktop printer. Now, this goes against the whole paperless concept behind most Faxination deployments, but some industry verticals, particularly legal and government agencies, are still required to maintain physical copies of fax documents. The print connector is included with every license of Faxination, so if you have a use for it, it's there. Our MFP connector allows you to send outbound faxes from multifunctional peripheral devices, which is a fancy way of describing an all-in-one scan, copy, print type device that most organizations have. Now, most of these devices are capable of inbound and outbound faxing, usually with an optional and shockingly expensive hardware fax modem add-on. But there are several benefits to integrating your MFPs with Faxination, including detailed logging and archiving of messages, consistent cover sheets, least cost routing through remote fax devices or remote voice-over-IP gateways, and there's also no requirement for an analog phone line dedicated to the device. Out of the box, we support MFP devices from Canon, HP, OSE, Ricoh, Sharp, and Xerox. The connector is extensible through external scripts to support new models and other manufacturers, which we typically evaluate as enhancement requests. The Faxination Web Service Connector supports inbound and outbound fax and mobile messaging through a programmatic interface. which means that a custom application that you've written or commissioned can interface directly with Faxination through .NET Web Services. For instance, maybe your organization has a custom CRM system that was created specifically for you and your business. Your developer could add a button to the interface that would send a document, like an invoice or a purchase order, as a fax message and automatically pull the fax number from your customer database. You can think of this as basically turning Faxination into a development platform. Your developers don't need to know how to communicate with a Brook Trout card or a fax-over-IP gateway. Fenestre has already done that work, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. This connector requires IIS to be available on the fax server to create the web service URL, and we provide detailed code samples and compiled binaries that fully demonstrate how it all works. We also see some code samples later in the training. The Faxination SharePoint connector allows you to route inbound fax and mobile messages to SharePoint document libraries. This is often used in combination with SharePoint workflow rules or to create a special fax message archive. The connector can also extend your Faxination logging options. By default, the Faxination log is stored in a SQL table, but you can also, or alternatively, write the Faxination log entries to a SharePoint custom list. The Faxination HL7 connector allows Faxination to integrate with healthcare systems based on the international standard HL7 protocol. HL7 was designed specifically for the healthcare industry for data exchange between systems within a single organization. With this connector, Faxination can route incoming fax and mobile messages into an HL7-based workflow or extend the communication abilities of an existing HL7-based system for outbound messaging. New for Faxination 2016, the Mailbox connector is unique in that it's specifically host-to-host. It's used to monitor one or more Exchange or Office 365 mailboxes and route detected file attachments to any inbound-capable Faxination host. Used in combination with Microsoft's message filtering rules, custom document routing and business workflows can be initiated simply by sending an email with a file attachment to a monitored mailbox. Only one mailbox is required to create hundreds of custom routes, which is important in hosted per mailbox environments such as Office 365. Also new for Faxination 2016 is the REST connector. REST stands for Representational State Transfer, and it's similar to .NET Web Services, but has its own advantages and disadvantages. If you need to integrate with Faxination programmatically, it really comes down to which type of interface your developer is most comfortable with. The REST connector includes its own HTTP server, so IIS is not a requirement, and code samples are provided. The Faxination SMTP stack is not technically a host connector, but it functions as one. We retired our old Universal Mail connector several releases ago and replicated its functionality as part of the Faxination kernel process and just inherent to the server. This was done primarily so that SMTP communication would always be available to Faxination and can be used for things like health monitoring and system alerts. The SMTP stack is useful in locked down Exchange environments, non-Exchange email environments, and hosted email environments such as Office 365. Moving on to our device connectors, we begin with the Faxination ASCOM device. ASCOM digital fax routers are external 2-channel ISDN devices with a COM port interface. And because they use standard AT commands over a serial port, they don't require specific drivers and still work with modern 64-bit operating systems, assuming you still have a COM port or a USB adapter. Now, these things are no longer manufactured, and it's difficult even to find a photo of one on the internet. But if you're evaluating Faxination, you need a fax device to test with, and you have one of these lying around, this connector is available. Of course, since these are end-of-life devices, they're not supported by Fenestre for production use. The most common connector for hardware fax cards is the Faxination BFax TR Extreme device. This connector is used with the Brook Trout TR1034 series of cards, which are available in many configurations and line counts, up to full T1E1 spans on a single board. This connector is also used with the Brook-Trout TrueFax series, which are entry-level fax cards maxing out at 4 channels. The BFax TR Extreme device connector is also used with the Brook-Trout SR140, which is a software implementation of the TR1034 card that can be used for fax-over-IP. It supports both SIP and H.323 signaling, depending on which provides the best interoperability for your telephony system or gateways. Using a software-only fax device eliminates hardware failure liability and also allows you to completely virtualize the Faxination server. Fenestre officially supports both VMware and Microsoft Hyper-V. The Faxination CAPI device is for inbound and outbound fax messaging via a CAPI interface layer. CAPI was designed as a standardized interface for voice and fax telephony, so it's not tied to any particular manufacturer, although Icon and AVM were the primary adopters of this standard in the fax card industry. Icon's Diva series of CAPI-based fax cards are now sold under the Dialogic name. XCAPI is a third-party CAPI interface layer that supports software-based fax-over-IP, providing another alternative for a fully virtualized Faxination environment. Back in the days of dial-up internet, data/fax modems were common and included in just about every new PC as a standard. The Faxination fax modem device can be used to communicate with these cards, but they're not suitable for use in a business context due to their lack of call control and the fact that they only support a single channel per card. We include this connector for evaluations, but just as with the ASCOM digital fax router, they're not supported for production use. The Faxination FOIP device connector provides yet another software-based fax-over-IP alternative. It supports SIP signaling only, so it can't be used where H.323 signaling is required, but it is capable of being configured for multiple gateways simultaneously, which is something that the Brook-Trout SR140 and XCAPI are incapable of. As with the other software-based fax-over-IP solutions, this connector is perfectly suitable for virtualization. The Faxination mobile device connector allows you to send and receive mobile SMS text messages via a hardware device, such as a GSM modem, or via an internet protocol to a short message service center, or SMSC. The main distinction between the two types of interfaces is speed, with a hardware GSM modem capable of about 3 messages per minute, and an internet-based service capable of 12 messages per second or even more. Most implementations of this connector are for outbound messaging for applications such as mobile alerts or reminders. Inbound routing is not as flexible as it is with fax, but it's still possible. And finally, the Faxination MMS device, combined with the Faxination MMS server service, can be used to send and receive multimedia mobile text messages via the MM7 protocol and a Multimedia Message Service Center, or MMSC. Hardware GSM modems are not supported for MMS messaging. Now, due to the advances in mobile phone technology, mobile apps, and social media, MMS messaging is largely obsolete. But if you have an application in mind, Faxination can make it happen.